What is up, y'all? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about my desk and office renovation and giving you some tips and tricks if you want to get some ideas for your own office or desk space. If you don't know, in my day job, I'm a software developer, and in my free time, I'm a content creator, video editor, photo editor. I work on my fiance's coffee truck business. I do a lot of things, so this office needed to be really versatile to fit all of my needs. I spent a lot of time researching everything from furniture to lights to actual desk setup items, so if you're looking to get some ideas for your own setup, this video is probably for you, so stick around and let's jump into it. So before you do any renovations or any changes to your setup, you have to decide what style are you going for. Are you going for a more gamer style where you're gonna have a lot of neon lights, pinks and blues? Or are you gonna go for a more minimal modern style, which I have here, which is a lot of whites and woods and a lot of natural tones and textures without a lot of color naturally being added to the space. Those are done with lights later on, but the actual furniture and main composition of the space is gonna be done with more natural colors. Now, I went with the latter. As you can see behind me, I do have a couple lights, but the space in general is white, wood, and black. This wall behind me was actually the newest addition, and I think it made the most difference to the space out of anything that I'm gonna talk about in this video, so pay attention. This is a super budget option to make your space look so much different. Before, all of these walls were white, and it was fine. It was very minimal, but to me, it felt a little too clinical, or kind of like I was in an insane room where they put the padding on the walls and I'm not allowed to leave. That's what it felt like when I came in here. There was no differentiation between each walls, so it kind of became one weird room. So what I did is I went to Home Depot and I picked up a gallon of the Behr Graphic Charcoal paints for $23. Like I said, super budget friendly option to change your room a lot. Now this paint does two different things. Because it's an accent wall, it breaks up the space, it adds a little more contrast, and makes the space a little bit more interesting, which is what I wanted. But two, it actually diffuses light a lot better, so things like my accent lights behind me, they don't reflect off the wall as much. They get diffused into the wall, and it's a much softer and nicer feel, and I think it makes the room look just so much better. So moving forward, if you can't do anything else in this video, even though a lot of the things I'm gonna talk about are budget friendly, paint, super cheap, makes the space look a lot different with just one color. The next component to a great desk and office setup, in my opinion, is figuring out your space utilization. We'll talk about the desk in a second, but something I wanted to add to the space was my $120 storage unit from IKEA, and I think it's worth talking about. The unit has a faux walnut top with black metal construction, which makes it fit almost any office setup perfectly. The top shelf, in my opinion, is more of a display shelf where I keep things like plants, lights, and show items. The second shelf is more of a storage shelf, but I still don't want it to be too dirty, so I limit what I'm actually storing here to just a few things. The bottom half of the unit is the main storage compartment. These doors click into place with a magnetic latching system, and the doors are only semi-see-through, so you don't have to worry too much about clutter in here. This is where I store the main bulk of my things, like camera equipment, extra keyboards, and whatever else I have laying around that might need to be stored away. I also picked up a white IKEA pegboard, which I put up on the wall right here, and I hope to upgrade this in the future because right now it basically just holds a keyboard and a few other things, so it's honestly not that useful yet. This is another thing that, in retrospect, I wish I had moved away from the lighter color scheme and gone with either black or maybe their wood styling to better match my setup. The parts for these pegboards are super cheap, and there are a ton of configuration options, ranging from hooks to containers to full-on storage shelves. Lastly, I think that having display shelving really just elevates an office space a little bit more, so I have this black modern shelf that I got from Nathan James. This shelf is simply used to display things I think are really cool. I have a Lego Porsche model, a Shinola Cola, and a Shinola baseball, and an extra keyboard that I just want to display. It doesn't do much functionally for the space, but I think it brings a little personality to the setup. Now for the desk. I wanted my main setup to be against this far wall. I could never really find a desk style that I liked that came pre-built, so I picked up this IKEA tabletop that everybody in the world uses, and I went with the darker walnut color because I'm still trying to bring a little bit more contrast to the space. The desktop itself is relatively inexpensive, again coming from IKEA, but I've had it for 4 years and it still looks amazing. As for the bottom part of the desk, I actually have two solutions going on here. I have the IKEA Alex drawers as a storage solution, so I have quick access to things like cables, hard drives, documents, and whatever else I might need to store. But in retrospect, I wish I would have gone with the black drawers or a little bit darker color, as I feel like they would have gone better with the darker tabletop I'm using. A lot of the desk setups online use spacers to bring their tabletop up a few inches off the Alex drawers to give a more comfortable height. But this is where my second solution comes into play. I actually had an extra pair of standing desk legs sitting around, so I set my tabletop on top of that. This allows me to choose the height of my desk if I really wanted to, but all I really use it to do is raise the height a few inches. I find it really hard to keep my cable management clean while also allowing the desk to raise up and down, so I mainly just keep it in one spot. Now to actually talk about the part that everybody wants to talk about, the desk setup. Personally, I think I killed this setup. It looks so good, and more importantly, it allows me to be productive. I've designed this desk setup in a way that allows me to maximize the amount of things I can do while minimizing the clutter and decision making I have to make to be able to do those things. As a software developer, video editor, photo editor, and gamer, this setup has to be versatile to fit all my needs. To start, I have a desk pad from Minimal Desk Setups. I specifically chose this one because it doesn't have a lot going on, it's darker to fit my setup, and there's very, very minimal branding. It's made of wool and doesn't cost an arm and a leg like some of the other desk pads. Grovemade. This one was only around $25 to $30 all in with shipping. It's large enough where I can fit the rest of my peripherals comfortably on it, and speaking of which, sitting on top of it is my GMMK Pro White Ice Edition. I won't talk too much about this keyboard because I have an entire video dedicated to it, but just so you know, this is the best keyboard I have ever used. It has Gateron red switches in it. I think they sound so good. Next to that is my Logitech G Pro wireless mouse in black. Now, I'm not a huge fan of the glowing G logo, but overall the mouse has been awesome. It comes in at only 80 grams and has been perfect for gaming and editing with the included side buttons with extra functionality. Moving up in the setup, my audio system is one that I would recommend for literally anybody who is interested in upgrading their audio setup. The main core of my audio setup is my Elgato Wave XLR audio interface. It's mainly controlled with this large dial on the front, which has a visual indicator of the levels circling the knob. Clicking in the knob changes the mode from microphone to headphones to the ability to crossfade between your mic and PC, and there's also a 48-volt phantom power option if your microphone requires it. The top of the Wave XLR is the coolest part because it's a touch-sensitive pad that allows you to quickly mute and unmute your mic just by tapping it, and it was a huge selling point for me as somebody who wants to be able to quickly turn on and off my mic. The other amazing thing about the Wave, in my opinion, is the XLR, USB-C, and 3.5mm headphone jack all come out of the back of the device. This was a problem on my Focusrite 2i2 because all the inputs were in the front, which meant it would clutter my desk with wires. Elgato specifically designed this for people who want to have it on their desk, and they obviously thought about this. My microphone is held up by my Rode PSA-1 boom arm, and the microphone itself is a Rode Pod mic. This mic is the best mic I would suggest for anybody who wants to upgrade into the XLR mic territory because at only $100, this mic is studio quality on a budget. My speakers are the Audio Engine A2 Plus speakers, and to be honest, I really don't care too much for external speakers beyond the fact that they look good and they sound decent. These check both of those boxes. They also offer a ton of connection options, such as the 3.5mm stereo mini jack, stereo RCA, USB, and Bluetooth. The showstopper for this whole desk setup is my 34-inch ultra-wide, 160Hz capable, nano IPS, 1 millisecond response time G-Sync compatible monitor from LG. I also made a video dedicated to the ultra-wide versus dual monitor debate, but I'm an ultra-wide guy through and through, at least for a primary setup, so this monitor is perfect for me. This thing is quite a beast though, so I have it being held up by a Herman Miller Flow monitor arm, which is quite an expensive monitor arm, but I really do appreciate Herman Miller's quality, so I think it's a great one. Now going back to something I quickly mentioned and something I think that people severely underestimate, plants. I know it sounds weird, but trust me, there's something almost magical about adding plants to a workspace and seeing it transform from something more clinical or corporate to something that almost feels alive. It feels like there's so much more warmth in a space once you start adding plants. I don't really have any recommendations for how many plants you need in your space, only that it's really hard to overdo it. You can really go crazy here and it honestly won't look bad. However, it's important what type of plants you decide to use, and there's only really two main options, fake or real. Now I have both kinds in my setup, the only difference being that the fake doesn't look as good in person. If I were being honest though, it's almost impossible to tell the difference on camera, and I've even had people ask before if my plants were real because they just couldn't tell. Now I picked this one up on Facebook Marketplace for $15, so they're really not that expensive. The other option is real plants, and if you go this route, I would suggest you pick up plants that are really easy to take care of if you're someone like me. A few plants you could use are money plants, monsteras, or snake plants. All of these are relatively easy plants to get and take care of because they don't need a lot of light and they're also cheaper. The tints of green and color coming from plants just really elevates an office space in my opinion, and it's really overlooked a lot of the times, but if you look at some of your favorite creators' office setups online, I almost guarantee they're going to have some sort of plants in them. The other area you can really go in on, depending on your tastes, is lighting. The thing about lighting is it can either be really expensive or relatively cheap, depending on what you want. Again, most of my lighting in my setup was still bought from IKEA, but really you can buy it from anywhere. My recommendation would be to look for things that fit the style of your room or your office. I looked for more modern or minimal lighting because that was the style that I was going for. When you're thinking about lighting options, there's only really two areas you have to think about, and I broke these down into practical lights and accent lights. Practical lights, for this example, are lights you can actually see. These could be lamps, exposed light bulbs, or really even just an interesting looking light. As long as they can be seen, we're counting them as practical lights. The other half of it is accent lighting. And accent lighting is all the lights that are going to bring life and color to your room without being totally visible. And you can think of these as light bars or light strips hidden behind your desk or behind furniture. Now, in terms of color, I don't really have any recommendations except to do what you think looks good. I personally keep mine at a balance between warm and cool tones to kind of give the office a really cool look. And that's pretty much all there is to it. A desk and office renovation. It can be done on a budget. It can be done pretty easily. You don't have to obviously do all the things that I talked about in this video. They're just the things that I decided to do and I thought they'd be worth talking about. Everything from the storage units, the lights, the plants, the paint, the actual desk setup that I have going on, it's all personal preference. So pick and choose one or two things that you want to do, or all of the things, or none of the things. It's totally up to what you want your space to look like and where you work the best. If you like this video, thought there's anything of value in it, please hit that subscribe button. It means a ton. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, put those down in the comment section below. I love reading and responding to those. Other than that, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.